All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. I have the privilege of being joined on this edition of this podcast by the one and only Ernest Dancy. Ernest, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, Will. I'm glad to be on the show. I'm glad to be speaking about all things NBA, especially free agency.
Yeah, listen, I mean that those wheels have been churning and you knew that was going to happen. It's one of those things. We know about the fireworks on the 4th of July, but nonetheless, we always expect fireworks around the end of June and the beginning of July in the world of the National Basketball Association, because between the NBA draft and free agency, there's a slew of player movement. And let's not dilly-dally on this one, the biggest move so far, because there are still some possible big moves to go down this month, maybe even this weekend, depending on what happens with DeMar DeRozan, but nonetheless, Paul George going to the Philadelphia 76ers. I talked about this the other day. It improves Philadelphia. Philadelphia made some other moves as well because it's one of those where we talked about this before. Heading into the summer, Joel Embiid was the only guy that they had in a contract. So that meant that they were going to have the opportunity to get off to the races. I feel Philadelphia has improved, but I'm not moved by Paul George going there. I know, like we talked about it, but now you could you'll come at it and tell everybody how you feel about PG-13 going to Philly.
So I think the Paul George move, I think he should have went to the Pacers, especially after they re-signed Siakam. I think that that would have been a perfect move for him. It would have been a homecoming. Uh, he's a weapon on both sides, defensively and offensively, that they needed. And he would have been able to excel with that team, with both Halliburton, Siakam, Miles Turner. With Philly, he's an added weapon for Embiid to pass to out of the double and triple teams, but he's also another injury liability for the Sixers, just like Embiid. They added Andre Drummond, so that should help Maxi out in case Paul George and Embiid are hurt at the same time. But I don't know. I'm more excited really about the Kelly Oubre re-signing than
No,
really signing Paul George.
listen, bringing Kelly Oubre back was big. You and I talked about it before. You knew that they were going to re-sign Tyrese Maxey. He was going to get the bag, well deserved, because listen, that young man balled out last year, and
Yep.
and he deserves it. For me, my biggest thing with Paul George, I don't think he has the stomach for the city of Philadelphia. Okay, because the Philly fans, regardless of the sport, they're a different beast. Okay, and they're gonna tell you how it is, whether you want to hear it or not. And you've got to be tough, to deal with that. I'm not sure that Paul George is ready for that because you started your career in Indiana. You get to the second round there, maybe the conference finals, they'll love you. With the Clippers, even though they didn't live up to expectations, him and Kawhi together, yo, it's the Clippers. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, you got to the playoffs, you got to the second round, we good. Philly, it's a little bit different, especially when you're talking about you're signing it for the amount of money that you did. So I'm not sure if Paul George is ready for that.
No, I would have to um I would have to agree. It's almost like the New York fan base.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and they're like expecting to win a championship now. They've been through the process. They watched Toronto go through them courtesy of Kawhi and then go on to win the championship.
Hmm.
You have the best offensive threat on the planet in Joel Embiid.
Hmm.
Their crowd, their fan base, they're excited, they're enthusiastic, and I don't think they're going to settle for anything less than a championship. And Paul George had better be ready for that. I mean, he has the talent, he has the skill sets to help deliver it, but like you said, does he have the mental fortitude? That's the question.
Trivia question for you. When was the last time the Philly got to the Eastern Conference Finals?
When Allen Iverson led them there, right?
That was 2001. So my point is that fan base, and that was the year that was last year Philly went to the finals. So my point is, that fan base, they want to see something because it's been more than 20 years since they've gotten that far. And I'm like, I me looking at the Sixers team, honestly, it makes me think about playing spades because we play spades and it's like, okay, how many books can you make? Okay, I got two and a possible. And that's basically what the Sixers are because you have your one guarantee, which is Tyrese Maxey, but of the other stars, you got two possibles in Embiid and PG-13. And I'm like, it's one of those where they're talented, yeah, but you can't help your team if you're in the trainer's room all the time. You know what I'm saying? Especially in the postseason. And that's the thing. It's like when you're a star player, it's one of those things. It's like people want to see, okay, what have you done in late May and June? You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
Yes,
you've been to 5, 6, 7 all-star teams, for represented your country in the Olympics. That's all well and good. But, especially in a town like Philly, man, they want to see results. But like you said, bringing back Kelly Oubre, bringing in Andre Drummond. They just signed Caleb Martin today, did Philadelphia. You know what I'm saying? So they have a team, but it just comes down, PG-13 is one thing, but they have to find a way. I don't know if it's going to take bubble wrap, whatever. They got to keep the big fella healthy. You
yep.
know what I'm saying? Because you could bring in whoever you want. If you don't have a healthy Joel Embiid, and I ain't talking about come playoff time, well, he's 80% playing with a bad back or a bad hamstring. No, 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 no,
No,
no.
we need him 100%, 95 to 100%.
Exactly. Exactly. That's my biggest thing right there. And just segueing from that, let's get to the Los Angeles basketball. There's plenty to talk about with the Clippers, but I want to talk to you about the Lakers. And I don't know about you. This franchise, to me, has become a shell of what it was. You know what I'm saying? When you think about Laker history, there was a mystique to it. The Hall of Famers, only the Celtics now have won more championships than the Lakers. Nobody has more NBA Finals appearances than the Lakers. You
And in
think
all of sports, it's only the
they they
Celtics and the Yankees, right?
the Yankees with 27, and then the Montreal Canadiens in hockey with 23. That's
Okay,
it. That
that's
that's
it.
it.
Wow, see
Okay.
that?
So, that gives you an idea of what the Lakers organization has meant to sports. Okay. And then I sit back and see this offseason right now. Nobody wants to play with LeBron. Okay. Then LeBron talked about, I'm willing to take a pay cut, but then you took a 2-year deal for 104. It was one of those where they talked about, well, we're going to offer Dan Hurley a contract he can't refuse. There was talks about the Lakers offering him 100 million. I'm like, 70 million ain't 100 million. And I'm like, I don't care. If you bring in a college coach who has succeeded like he has at the college level, he's gonna want to say in personnel decisions, regardless of whether he's coaching the NBA or not. Rob Pelinka wasn't willing to give that up. And it's one of those now, the worst kept secret, clearly got revealed when the Lakers took Bronny in the second round. Everybody knew that was coming. Okay.
Yep.
That was like the biggest no surprise since when the Lakers took Lonzo Ball, when LeVar basically called it. And now, like, so LeBron took that 2-year deal for 104 million. They went out there and got JJ Redick. They really have not improved in free agency. And at this point, it's like, are the Lakers going to try to defend their in-season tournament crown? Because you can't really look at this team the way that they're constructed and say, hey, they're going to contend for another championship.
Yeah, you can't take them seriously. You really can't. And quiet is kept. Both LeBron and AD played most of the 82 game regular season schedule last year. And they did worse last season than they did the season before, in which they reached the conference finals. Um, their team is run like a mom and pop shop. Shout out to LeBron for getting his son helping facilitate his son's way into the league. I mean, he used his power, he used his pull, and any dad will want to help their child out, help their child achieve their dream as much as possible. So shout out to him for that. But actual basketball wise, it doesn't really do anything to help the Lakers out in the win-loss column. I like the rookie that they picked up with, what was it, the 17th pick? I
Dalton,
like
Dalton,
Connect.
Dalton Connect, yeah.
That was a good pickup. I like
Hmm.
him.
Hmm.
Um, but there's not much else to be excited about with that team. They should not have hired JJ Redick. Mark Jackson is still out there. I don't know why Mark Jackson didn't get hired. Isn't he far enough removed from, I guess, him pushing his religious beliefs on like the players and stuff like that at Golden State? Isn't he far removed from that? He's a very good coach. He knows how to manage personalities. He knows how to instill belief in his players. Look at Klay Thompson, look at Draymond Green, look at Steph Curry, who had come off of all of those ankle surgeries to now become the Curry that we know. The soon to be Hall of Famer, the best shooter ever, right? They should have hired Mark Jackson. The moves, Clay's not stupid. Taxes are very high in California. So if you're offering me 20 million a season, a lot of that is going to get eaten up in taxes. I'm probably going to get the equivalent of that if I sign with Dallas, right?
Hmm.
Even though on paper it looks like less money,
Hmm.
after all of the taxes and stuff is taken out, is going to be probably the same, if not more. And then you have Luca, you have Kyrie, you have Jason Kidd as the coach instead of this first year coach who has never coached before. It was a smarter move. So he left the money on the table that LeBron was going to try to add to the pile, right? Who else were they trying to go after? I mean, we suspected they would go after Trae Young. We haven't heard much about that.
There were rumors about DeRozan, but once LeBron signed that 2-year deal for 104, that was dead because DeRozan, he's not taking a pay cut. There's rumors that, they're trying to work out a sign and trade between Sacramento and Chicago, and they might need a third team to facilitate it. So San Antonio might jump into that mix. And then there's also talks that DeRozan might just take a 1-year deal and try to flip it back around and get another big contract next year. So they were linked that there was rumors about him going to the Lakers, but again, once LeBron took that a buck 04, that was done.
That was it. And
Mhm.
quiet as kept, why aren't they pursuing Zach LaVine? I'm not sure. Injuries aside, I'm not sure why people are acting like Zach LaVine can't play. I don't
Yo,
know why his stock has dropped so low. They should be pursuing Zach LaVine. You need a shot creator and you need somebody who can shoot from the outside. You need somebody who can potentially carry the franchise on with Anthony Davis after
right,
LeBron is done.
right.
Zach LaVine would be a good target. So I'm not sure what the Lakers brain trust is doing.
Listen, I mean, there's different layers to it. I mean, for me, number one, I don't think there's a lot of coaches that are willing to line up and go coach, be the head coach of the Lakers right now because the thing is like, fair or not, LeBron has a reputation of being a coach killer. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, you look at most recently in LA, okay, you went there and Luke Walton was a coach and you immediately basically flushed him out. Like meaning like you didn't respect him for day one. And I'm like, okay, you knew he was a head coach when you went there, so why go there? And then, you bring in
It's
oh my
but you know what? It's hard to be coached by a coach who used to be a player in your
mhm,
generation.
right.
So he goes from Luke Walton getting switched off onto him on the perimeter and him destroying Luke Walton
Hmm.
to now listening to Luke Walton bark out commands from the sideline. It ain't gonna work.
Well, who oh my gosh, I like my God, Frank Vogel. That I was,
Mm-hmm.
I almost said Lawrence Frank for a minute. I was like, wow, Frank Vogel. So you go to Frank Vogel, you do win a championship, and Frank Vogel got canned. and then they bring in Darvin Ham. And honestly, it's one of those. Darvin Ham to me, am I going to sit up there and say he's Pat Riley? No. But Darvin Ham did the best with what he had. Okay. And it's one of those where for the Lakers, they got swept by Denver last year in the Western Conference Finals. Okay. And then this year they lost to Denver in 5 games. Problem was, y'all basically came back with the same exact team that you had last year and said and expected different results. I'm like, y'all still had no answer for the Joker. It's one of those with Jamal Murray. You know what Jamal Murray does in the postseason, and those are the two guys that primarily killed you. So, for me, it was like, and it's like, Darvin Ham's not the only one. I mean, LeBron, he's been through I think like close to 10 coaches now throughout his career. So when it's all said and done, you know, once you consistently are going through coaches like that, it shrinks the pool especially at this point in LeBron's career, because the man's going to be 40 in December.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where LeBron's set in his ways from a basketball standpoint. And then you're going to bring in a coach who's more than likely 10, 15, maybe 20 years older than him. I know it has to be a working relationship, but it's one of those where you got two alphas in that situation and they're going to be set in their ways. So it's really not going to work. And I think that's why they, for me, I can't even say really circle back to JJ Redick. I think JJ Redick was the answer all along. I think at the end of the day, Dan Hurley was smoke and mirrors because they just wanted to say, well, we did our due diligence because you heard the reports from Woj saying, oh, Dan Hurley was a Lakers guy all along. Okay, so why did it take y'all to the end of May or beginning of June to bring him in for an interview? Because I'm like, if he was y'all's guy, you fired Darvin Ham like 5 or 6 weeks before all of that started. So if Dan Hurley was your guy, he should have been on a flight to LA back at the beginning of May. So I think it was really all smoke and mirrors just so they could say they did their due diligence with JJ Redick. Honestly, some people are going to disagree with this, some people won't. LeBron's going to be coaching through JJ Redick. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yes,
they're boys. You know what I'm saying? And it
I
was
agree.
it was a package thing. Bring back LeBron, bring in JJ Redick. Draft Bronny. It's one of those where I get it from the nostalgic standpoint because no matter what Bronny can always say now, regardless of what he does as a ball player, I got drafted into the NBA. If the Lakers wanted to, they could have taken that pick at pick 55 and taken somebody else and still signed Bronny as a rookie free agent. But I understand from the nostalgic standpoint because at the end of the day, there's only 60 guys. And that pool has diminished, for American born players with so many more international born players coming into the mix that you can say, okay, I got drafted into the NBA. But I look at the Lakers, man, and the West already has gotten better. We're going to
Yep,
talk more about that. They are definitely fighting an uphill battle.
they are. They are. Especially if DeRozan signs with the Kings. And then Morant and Steven Adams are coming back for the Grizzlies. So things can only get tougher for both the Lakers and Golden State.
Listen, I mean, with Golden State, the run is over. It's one of those where sometimes you're the last one to realize when something's done. Sometimes you have a coach or somebody that tells you, listen, you ain't got it no more. But since you've done it before, you think that you can do it again. And I'm like, you know, Steph, I've been saying this since last year, like the season before, rather. The league is caught up to the Warriors, okay?
Yes.
And on top of that, they've gotten older. And for all of that flash and pizzazz of the 3-point shot, those guys played D. Played D in those
Yep.
championship years. You had Andre Iguodala who played D. You know what I'm saying? Draymond was a better all-around player than
Javal
he,
McGee was a
right,
great shot blocker.
right. Listen, Father Time is undefeated. Okay. So I think honestly, I think Steph and LeBron are kind of in the same boat. Whereas, you know what? People are still gonna show up to watch them play because it's Steph Curry, it's LeBron. And even at this advanced point of their respective careers, you never know when they're going to put on a show and give you a 40-point night. So, but I think the parade is passing by both of them.
You know what happened with Golden State? The I can literally pinpoint when things went wrong. It was when they had that high lottery pick and they picked Wiseman number instead of
Num,
picking
num-
LaMelo.
yeah, yeah, they took a number two.
Yeah, they picked Wiseman instead of taking LaMelo. Had they taken LaMelo, they would have had the creative ball handler, young point guard, 6'7", who could guard twos
Hmm.
that they would have needed. Then that would have been better off for Steph Curry and for Klay Thompson and for Draymond, right? But they picked
Absolutely.
Wiseman. The second mistake they made was not allowing Wiseman to play through his mistakes. You made the choice and you took Wiseman. It's not like the kid was untalented. He barely played his freshman year in college. So they had to let him use that first year and a half with Golden State to work through the mistakes. They benched him, they sent him down to the G League, then they lost all confidence in him. That was where the mistake happened because they should have been able to usher that pick into what the Spurs did when they had that losing season because David Robinson was hurt and
And
they
they put
took
and it took
Duncan.
him right.
Not to say that LaMelo and Wiseman are on Duncan's level, but Golden State had the opportunity right there and they dropped the ball.
Listen, you are 100% right because I look at it when you bring in a big fella, you got to let the big fella play. And instead, they were trying to make him play off of their stars.
Yep,
Okay. And it's one of those where, like the old saying goes, you're never going to see how good that a fish is if you're telling that fish to go climb a tree. It's not going to happen.
exactly.
And that was the same
Exactly.
thing with James Wiseman. And honestly, them goofing on that pick reminds me of when the Pistons had the second pick in 2003 and they took Darko.
Mm-hmm.
And you had Carmelo sitting right there. And like, yeah, we saw the Pistons, win a chip, but then get to the conference finals 6 years in a row. And I'm like, yo, when you have an opportunity to get a certain level of player, you need to go out there and get it. And I'm like, we would be talking about LaMelo Ball in a totally different light right now had he gone to
Yep.
Golden State because he probably has a championship.
Yep. Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and speaking of Golden State, the guy that left there, and for me, I feel like Clay was in his feelings because, he wanted to get a certain amount of bread. You and I talked about this. Should have taken that 2 year, 48 million extension
Yep.
when it was on the table. Not only that, but I'm like, dude, you had 2 years where you didn't play and they still paid you handsomely. You know, you know,
Correct.
you know what I'm saying? So I think Clay's in his feelings, but I think he went to the team that he feels gives him the best opportunity to win. And I don't know about the other 2 years of the deal, but I guarantee you in year number one, you are going to see a motivated Klay Thompson because he wants to prove the Warriors wrong. He also wants to prove anybody wrong that says, you know what, Klay can't get it done anymore. So he's going to be in the gym working hard this summer. Might come in to camp in the best shape of his career. I like the fit. I would like it even more if Dallas would say, you know what, we're going to have you come off the bench. Maybe not, be a bench player per se for the whole game, but I'm like, come off the bench, but we still got you in those key fourth quarter situations where you're playing with Luca and Kyrie at the same time. Because, whenever you lose, whatever you can't do well always shows up. Dallas's inability to have somebody not named Luca and Kyrie hit an outside shot finally caught up to them when they lost to Boston. So I think, Clay going there, I really do feel fit wise, it was much better for Clay to go to Dallas than the Lakers.
As it pertains to him being a starter or coming off the bench, I believe there's no way in the world he's coming off the bench. He's starting for sure.
Okay.
Um, he's still way better than Derrick Jones, Jr.,
Well,
even though
well,
Derrick Jones
he
is
signed
more
he's
athletic.
but Derrick Jones ended up signing with the Clippers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So Clay is way better than Derrick Jones Jr., who he's going to be
absolutely.
replacing. Derrick Jones Jr. was just more athletic and
Hmm.
a better defender at this time. But
Hmm.
Clay is still no slouch defensively. He's
No,
just not elite like he was,
no.
right? As it pertains to uh as it pertains to Clay's like fitness and him this probably being a season for the ages for him, I agree with you. I agree. I think he's going to come in the best shape of his life. And it's already trending that way because he's going to be playing in the Olympics for the Bahamas.
Right,
So he's already going to be in the gym getting those high level runs, and then he's going
right,
to be competing at a high level during the summer. And
right.
all of that will just bleed in to the preseason and then the regular season next year. I do agree with you that the Mavericks were a way better fit for him than LeBron and AD, right, on
Mhm.
the Lakers, because again, back to the Philadelphia situation. They signed Paul George. Now you have two guys in Paul George and Embiid who you're not even sure if they're going to be able to play 75% of the regular season, right? Knock on wood for the Lakers. AD and LeBron played a lot of games last season. We don't know if they're going to be able to do that 2 seasons in a row. So I think Clay looked at all of that and said, yo, this team just came back from the NBA Finals. They do give me the best chance to get a ring. So I agree with you.
Listen, it's one of those where if Luca can just come in like in a little bit better shape, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? And I mean, Kyrie's going to give you everything. You know that. So I really like Dallas's chances. I mean, the percentages are against them just from the standpoint that you have to go back to LeBron's last year in Cleveland to actually find the last time that a team that lost the finals in the previous year got back. I mean, we haven't had a repeat winner since that Golden State team. You know what I'm saying? So the parity in the NBA is definitely different, but I still like Dallas. But the West, man, oh my goodness, very quietly. And to me, I think these moves are flying under the radar. I like what the Oklahoma City Thunder have been doing. They finished with the top seed in the West last year. You still got your young guns. They traded Giddy quietly and got Alex Caruso back from the Bulls. A lot of people ain't talking about that, but that's a big move. And then their top target this summer was Isaiah Hartenstein from the Knicks. They got him. Okay, they got some size. They got a guy who's going to play defense. They got a guy who's going to get some rebounds. And then you have a guy like Alex Caruso. That dude has ice water in his veins, man. And, people forget he was making some big shots for the Lakers, a
He
couple of
was.
years.
He really was. He was making big shots for the Bulls last
Yeah, yeah,
playoff series against the Knicks, right?
yeah,
It was
yeah.
the Knicks.
No, the Bulls last year,
Or
I
was
think
it the play-in?
the play-in because this year they lost in the play-in, and then the year before, they lost in the play-in again to the Heat.
Hmm.
That's when Miami got
Okay.
them.
Okay,
Hmm.
that's where it was. Yeah, when
Hmm.
Caruso was hitting big shots for the
Right,
Bulls.
right. So I'm like, I'm looking at that right there. The last 5 minutes of a game, Alex Caruso, if you leave him open, he's gonna hit a couple of big
Yeah, he's
shots.
gonna knock him down.
Hmm.
Yup, he's gonna knock him down.
And he's gonna be something that's gonna be big for that young Thunder locker room because I felt for the last couple of years they just need a veteran guy, you know what I'm saying? And Caruso can be that guy for them
Yep.
to come into that locker room. So I like it right there. Very quietly, a move that people are not talking about. And I expected this to happen, okay? I expected Denver to lose KCP. I didn't expect him to go to Orlando, but that is going to be big for Denver right there, not having him.
So now they've lost KCP, they've lost Jeff Green, and they lost Bruce Brown.
Hmm.
All three heavy contributors to their championship.
Yep.
They literally have to get Westbrook. Like they he's a necessity for them now. I understand the Joker's thinking and wanting Russ to come over because he's looking at it like literally when I'm not on the court, there is no facilitator for everybody else. Jamal Murray is not really a facilitator.
No.
He's a go get you a bucket
Right.
scorer.
Right.
Um, Russ, quiet as kept, played excellent defense for the Clippers last season. They said his impact on his opponent's field goal percentage was like drastic. It dropped down drastically when Russ was on a scorer. He's somebody who can still attack the basket.
Hmm.
He will create lob threat situations just like the Joker does for Aaron Gordon. And for DeAndre Jordan, I believe DJ is still coming off the bench for
Yeah,
Denver because
he
he's
just yeah,
helping to recruit Russ,
he just resigned. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Russ can still average a good 17, 18 points per game if he gets the minutes, just by hustle and his sheer will to win and his will to get to the basket. Uh, I think that that would be a good pickup. And I do think they still need to add more. I don't know how they're going to do it. That second apron, that's what's scaring a lot of teams.
Listen, it's one of those where, and the players agreed to this, okay? So it's not just something that the owners came down with. And that's why you're seeing certain teams like Minnesota, like Milwaukee, okay, like Phoenix, like the Nuggets. Everybody's being quiet this summer. Why? Because you've got that second apron. If you're Denver, you're paying the Joker. You're paying Jamal Murray. You're paying Aaron Gordon. You can't pay everybody. And Milwaukee's paying Giannis. They're paying Dame. They're paying
Middleton.
Middleton, Brooke Lopez. Okay, you can't pay everybody. Phoenix, they're paying Brad Beal, KD, and Devin Booker, and it's the same thing with the Lakers. I'm like, you figure with LeBron and AD by themselves, they're counting for about 100 million right there
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the cap, and that second apron penalty is going to be hard. And I want to like touch on that in a moment because there's a team that I want to highlight with that. But yeah, listen, it's making teams, think twice about that because I've had this off and on discussion with a friend of mine for years because, love him to death. Big shout out to him subliminally. He knows who he is, if he ever checks this out. But we talked about LeBron over the years, and it's just like, LeBron being upset, especially with Dan Gilbert, when Dan Gilbert didn't want to get this certain guy or go after another guy that can help the team win. And I'm like, listen, even though the Cavs won that championship in 2016, Dan Gilbert was not happy. Why? Because Dan Gilbert got hit with a huge luxury tax bill. And you can, as a player, you can be upset all you want, but I'm like, these guys are billionaires. You're not going to sit up there and tell them how to spend their money.
And
And
to do bad business. And it's like,
right,
I got here by doing great business.
right. And now I got to give up 60, 70, 80 million dollars as a penalty. And I ain't even signed X amount of guys. Most of those guys are looking at that like, nah, I want to keep my money in my pocket.
Yeah.
So like long story short, that second apron, and I knew it was gonna be like that.
Yeah.
It was gonna make a lot of teams, think twice about doing business. And it's like it's gonna make the star players going forward think differently as well, because you might have to go with like some of the NFL quarterbacks do and say, hey, maybe I take a pay cut. Maybe instead of taking 50 million, I take 35 a year. So this way we could sign some guys if I want to win, you know?
You know what? The only problem is, and from this standpoint, I understand Paul George. When you're like 32, 33 and up, and this is possibly the last big contract you can sign,
You want to cash in.
yep, you want to cash in for not only the dollar amount, but for the years and security.
Mm,
So it's tough. And the one thing that all of those teams had in common, even the ones that did win championships that you mentioned, were those were small market teams.
yeah,
And though that second apron affects them
more.
the the worst. So if you're in Denver and you're the organization, you love your fans. But if you happen to win one, you're like, y'all should be good for about 10 years, whether we win another one or not. Because we barely had any, if not, we barely had any championships. And in some cases, the teams had no championships.
Right.
And now we just won one a year ago, 2 years ago.
Hmm.
You got to let us reload financially too. So yeah, they're caught between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, you don't want to waste a generational talent's years just being mediocre after winning the championship,
Right.
but you also don't want to go broke.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, guys like the Joker don't come down the pike that often. And I totally understand where you're coming from. And I'm like, it's one of those where is the Joker going to be one of those guys who gets one championship, or are they going to be able to get more out of him? But like again, the financial, X's and O's of it. I mean, you look at two teams that, to me this summer that just said, you know what? Screw that second apron, the Knicks and the Celtics. And I'll start with the Celtics first
Two big
because
market teams.
right. To like, well, New York, definitely the biggest media market out there. Boston is no slouch either. Okay, as far as the media market. So you knew from last summer, once Jaylen Brown got 300 million, that Tatum was going to get at least 300 million as well.
Hmm.
That happened this summer, and it's like Tatum picked the perfect time to cash in, fresh off of winning a championship.
Yeah.
And they also paid Derek White. So now you're paying Brown, you're paying Tatum, you're
And
paying
they paid Drew Holiday in the middle of the season, remember?
right. So Boston, and this is funny about it because Boston has that second apron they're going to be dealing with, but with Grausback, their owner, if there was ever, I mean, the perfect time to cash out and exit stage right, it's he
Right
does,
now
he's not going to have to worry about that like the penalty, the luxury tax
at
penalties,
all.
and it's one of those where it's the Boston Celtics.
Yep.
People will be lining up to
They'll be
purchase.
lining up to overpay.
Right, because I mean, listen, I think last year the Suns got sold for 4 billion, the Phoenix Suns. So the Celtics easily are going for 5 billion. Easily.
Easily. I would say six. I
Yeah,
would say six.
because you figure you can kind of like juggle it any way you want and say, okay, which NBA franchise is more iconic, the Lakers or the Celtics? You know what I'm saying? Take your pick.
It's like take your pick.
And the championships, the Hall of Fame players, the mystique, the legend of the Celtics, not to mention, like you said before, the Boston media market. And on top of that, they're coming fresh off of a championship and they have the makings. I'm not saying that they're going to run it back, but they have the makings to be in the mix for the next couple
For
of years.
years to come.
Yeah. It's one of those where, you know what? Listen, again, I think he paid, I think back,
2 to 300 million.
yeah,
That's it.
back in like 2002. So I'm like, you know what? Clearly he's got his return on investment in more ways than one. So he's gonna cash out. And then you've got the New York Knicks, and I mean, the Knicks make money even if that team only wins 20 games because you
Yep.
figure the Garden still sells out. Now you have a new generation of Knicks fans that don't even know about Patrick Ewing. Okay.
This is
So
correct.
these guys and gals are coming out in droves. Okay. Not to mention, you still got the celebrities, Fat Joe, Tracy Morgan, Chris Rock.
Spike Lee.
Yeah, you name it. The Garden is once again the place to be. So for me, I was shocked by the moves that the Knicks made, but I'm not upset at them because it's one of those. I was just, I was thrown back. I literally almost fell out the chair when I saw that Mikal Bridges was going to the Knicks because I'm like, I know that the Nets got a slew of picks back, but I'm like, if you're the Nets, why do you trade not only with a team within your division? You're trading with a team in the same city.
One borough away.
Literally, you could hop on the two train from the Barclays Center and be at the Garden in what, 20 minutes?
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So you're trading with somebody within your city. That right there makes the Knicks better. And then of course, you can make the case, okay, did they overpay for Anunoby? Probably, but what he brings to the table, and it's astonishing when you look at the Knicks win-loss record when he plays and
Yeah,
and when he doesn't play, that
exactly.
that's the biggest eye opener. So yeah, they lost Hartenstein, which is going to hurt. But if
Hmm.
you're the Knicks, I feel like okay, you picked up Anunoby, you picked up Bridges, but then you could turn around and say, hey, you know what? Mid-season, somebody's going to have a fire sale. Maybe we can get ourselves another big,
Exactly.
another rim protector, and yo, we got something to run at this.
It is very true. It is very true. I love the trade for Bridges. Absolutely love the trade. You don't know what those picks are going to be. You don't know what those picks are going to become. You have your fan base excited and riled up. All of the attention is back on the Knicks. I do believe they overpaid for Anunoby. I wouldn't have paid that much, but I understand it. And now the fans have to appreciate the fact that the Knicks went all out to not only maintain what they had, but to add on to it. And now you're going to get Julius Randle back. I'm glad they didn't do anything silly like trade him. I know he has his flaws, but Knicks fans can't act like 23 and 10 power forwards are just laying around littered on
Right.
the sidewalk on New York City.
Nah.
This dude is now has built himself into a perennial all-star.
Yeah.
So you have another, even though he's at the power forward, you have another guy who can create shots for himself and draw double teams. The key is Mitchell Robinson staying healthy, which I
Yeah.
don't think he will. So it's going to be important during the season, like you said, when that fire sale does happen, for them to get another athletic big.
Hmm.
Um, Isaiah Hartenstein, talk about cashing out and taking advantage of the opportunity that you earned for yourself. He played great for the Knicks last season, right? And now he went and got the bag with OKC. So the Knicks did great. OKC did great because now you can move Chet Holmgren to the 4, have Hartenstein play the 5. You have Caruso at the 2, Shea at the 1. You have Williams at the 3, 4, something like no at the 3
Yeah.
because Chet's going to be at the 4. So you have
Hmm.
Williams at the 3. They still have Isaiah Joe
Hmm.
coming off the bench. They have Lou Dort. It, Sam Presti did an amazing job. He really did. World Wide West did an amazing job with the Knicks. Um, yeah, yep. So those are the two teams who were the top three winners of the NBA free agency period. I think. Who do you think is the third team?
For me, I would throw Philly into that mix, and I'm gonna say this though, just to on your Anunoby point. I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe hypothetically, maybe the Knicks overpaid for him because maybe Philly wanted him because I really thought that,
Mm-hmm.
okay, him possibly going back to play with his former head coach, Nick Nurse from Toronto, to me, I thought he would have been a better fit for them than Paul George. I totally understand why Philly went out there and got Paul George, and I'm not knocking him for it. But maybe that kind of scared the Knicks because I really thought that once the Knicks picked up Bridges, I was like, there's no way in the world that they're going to pay Anunoby now because of the luxury tax
I
situation.
felt the same way.
Yeah, but
I felt the same way.
The Knicks were just like, all right, you know what, we're good.
Mm-hmm.
Just man the torpedo, so to speak. And of course, unfortunately for Isaiah Hartenstein, that left him as the odd man out in New York City. But I like what they did because you got all those college guys back together for Villanova,
Yep.
and they know how to play with each other is one thing, but all of those guys know how to play without the ball in their hands, and they can still be effective.
All
That
of them.
is very important. And I think them playing together for several years in college works, and is going to help the Knicks. But then also the fact that all of them played college ball for multiple years and learned a system.
Yep.
A lot of these
Yep.
a lot of these young kids coming to the league nowadays, they don't know a system. And just circling back real quick, that's what helped Golden State, win those championships. Clay was, I think, a 3 or 4 year guy at Washington State. Same thing with Steph Curry at Davidson. Draymond Green was an All-American by the time he left Michigan State as a 4 year player. You're not going to play for a guy like Tom Izzo and not know your ins and outs. And then you had a guy like Andre Iguodala on that team who
Sean
played
Livingston.
Sean Livingston, what I'm saying, ball handlers, guys who are perimeter defenders. So, getting back to the Knicks, playing those college years and playing those college years together, I think definitely helps them. And I like what they've done, and they are going to be very interesting this season.
The
It's fun.
East is going to be interesting, period.
Yeah. because, for me with Milwaukee, yeah, they've been quiet this off season. I'm not surprised by that. But at least now Doc is going to have a training camp with these guys
True. And
because
they did add Torian Prince.
okay, so that helps right there.
Hmm.
And of course, you got to keep your veteran guys healthy. Miami, I know Miami didn't do anything really that's going to jump off the table, but it's still Miami. You never count those guys out. KCP going to Orlando, I think it's going to be bigger than like what people expect because Orlando already was a playoff team last year, and they darn near pulled it off in round number one against Cleveland. Okay, so maybe that can help them get over the hump. I look at Indiana. Okay, we talked briefly about Siakam. I love you knew that was going to happen because
Hmm.
if you're Indiana, you don't trade for a guy like that and give up what you gave up to just
To let
let
him walk.
right. And but then for me, the other big thing was them re-signing Obi Toppin because I called it when the Knicks traded Obi Toppin to Indiana. I said, you know what? He's going to play better because the Knicks tried to make Obi Toppin something that he wasn't. And to me, he's in a better system with Indiana as far as his skill set. So they brought him back. I think that's big. Indiana's going to have a lot of confidence coming in the next season after they just made the Eastern Conference Finals.
And they get
Hopefully,
Ben Mathurin back.
right. So all of those things are big right there. I know Donovan Mitchell re-signed with Cleveland. I'm not
No needle was moved.
no, I'm not moved with that because I'm like Donovan Mitchell's a guy, regardless of the team that he's on. Okay, you have a cap of getting to the second round. That's it. So there's nothing sexy, so to speak, that comes out of that. We saw Atlanta trade DeJounte Murray to New Orleans, and to me, that was a win-win for both teams because I wasn't impressed when DeJounte Murray got traded from the Spurs to the Hawks because I figured him and Trey Young together, I felt like it wasn't going to work because I'm like, okay, everybody else better go crash the boards. And then when they brought in Quinn Snyder, mid-season last year to be the head coach, and you figure Quinn Snyder preaches ball movement, okay, and you have two ISO guys primarily. So now you get rid of one of those ISO guys. I think it's a win-win for both teams. I like what he's going to bring to the table with New Orleans. And I mean, man, the West is stacked.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
The West is truly stacked, man. You got these veteran teams who we haven't even talked about yet, a la the Clippers. And did they resign Russ? I know they resigned James Harden. Did they
So
resign him?
Russ picked up his player option, his $4 million player option.
Okay.
So
And
and then Harden re-signed a new deal with the Clippers.
I'm not moved by that because
At all. They're
To
done.
me, to me, I think the Clippers' biggest move this offseason was re-signing Ty Lue. And Ty Lue, he didn't do it on purpose, but he couldn't have picked a better time to have his contract up because I know there were rumors that the Lakers wanted him. And I'm like,
Hmm.
do you really think Steve Ballmer was going to let Ty Lue go to the Lakers, especially when the Clippers are going into a new arena in
No way in
Inglewood?
the world.
No, exactly. And it's the same thing with James Harden. I'm like, ain't no other team out there, you know, that's going to sign James Harden and allow James Harden to be James Harden at this point in his career. And like to quote a good friend of mine, we've run out of ways to play with James Harden. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
I mean, people want to talk about the Hall of Fame, All-Star caliber players that LeBron has played with throughout his career, but LeBron still has four chips. I
Yep.
mean, I mean, you could go down the list of who James Harden has played with, and he still doesn't have a chip.
Literally.
You
Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, Chris
multiple,
Paul.
but hold up, not to cut you. KD and Russell Westbrook multiple times.
Yep. Twice each.
Mm-hmm.
Twice each.
Yes.
Right? Kyrie Irving. The list, Dwight Howard.
Chris
The list
Paul.
goes on and on. It literally does. And now Kawhi and
Well,
Paul George.
yeah. Listen, it's one of those where the Clippers, I think. it was one of those where I get it where Steve Ballmer wanted to make a splash, but you can kind of take your pick, whether it was the Clippers or the Brooklyn Nets, to say what team illustrated that, you know what, you can't just add water and stir and get a championship. Phoenix is finding that out the hard way now as well. But it's like you figure everything that the Clippers gave up to get Paul George. What was it? 5 first-round picks.
And Shea Gilgeous-Alexander.
Right. And look at what SGA has become. And Kawhi. Honestly, I say Kawhi's in the NBA reserves. Why? Because 1 week in a month, 3 weeks out of the year, that's when he's going to play. And
Yeah,
for me, I can't call Paul George PG-13 anymore because I call him rated R because what he does to teams is he screws them. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those for me where the Clippers, they attach their wagon to those two guys. It hasn't worked out. I think eventually what the Clippers just need to do, they just need to do what the Nets are doing right now. To say, screw it. Let's just
and
get
stack as many assets as possible, right?
and just try to rebuild. I know Ballmer's not going to do it because he wants to sell some tickets when they go into that a new arena this fall. But the Clippers, to me, I think their best chance to win that championship was 2020. Most of the team did not
When they
want
were
to
in the
go.
bubble.
Right, man. Most of the team didn't want to be there. And
Nope.
and they played like it because they had to fight, scrap, and claw. Remember, they were down 3-1 in the first round against Dallas,
Yeah.
and they were up 3-1 in the second round against Denver. And in games 5, 6, and 7, in each of those games, they had like 15, 20 point leads and blew them. And so it's like Doc got fired. And that to me, I really think was their best chance.
Yep. Yep. I agree. I agree. And they allowed LeBron to take advantage of it.
Hey,
And people can't hate on that. People can't hate on that. It's like the opportunity presented itself. And LeBron said, you know what? I'm not locked in here with y'all. Y'all are locked in here with me. And him and AD took full advantage of it. And the Lakers should have never fired Vogel. They should have never fired him. It's like, what you expect the dude to do? AD and LeBron both kept getting hurt. Like, what did they expect them to do? They should have never fired Vogel. They should have kept him.
listen, it's just one of those. I think if my memory doesn't fail me, I want to say Mike Brown probably had the longest tenure of a guy that was a head coach of a LeBron team because I think by LeBron's like midway through LeBron's second year in Cleveland, um, oh my gosh, Paul Silas got fired, and I think he got replaced by Mike Brown, and then when LeBron left to go to Miami, Mike Brown got fired that year by Cleveland anyway. And then, the 4 years when he was in Miami, it was Eric Spoelstra. He went back to Cleveland. They fired David Blatt, I think, midseason that year, and then they replaced him with Ty Lue.
What I look.
Right. And then, once he went to LA, the first year it was Luke Walton, and then it was Frank Vogel, and then Darvin Ham, and now it's gonna be JJ Redick. But yeah, man, it's listen, I've always said, people want to clown LeBron for that, but somebody had to win that championship. The same way that Phil Jackson didn't want to give the Spurs credit in 1999.
Because of the
Listen,
lockout.
listen, I know and you know a ton of Knicks fans. Okay. If the Knicks had won that finals that year, you would still, oh,
Be hearing about it.
right. You know what I'm saying? A freaking Sprewell and Allen Houston might have had a statue in front of Madison Square Garden,
Exactly.
you know?
Exactly. And it's like
So,
you're gonna blame the Spurs because their players and their program knew that all right, this lockout is going to end at some point. We got to stay in shape. We have to stay in top physical condition so that when this lockout ends, we hit the ground running.
right.
You're gonna blame the Lakers for saying, yo, these guys do not want to be here. Let's take advantage of how they are feeling and put the pedal to the metal and go out here and get this championship. You can't blame either organization.
Listen, somebody has to win it,
Yeah.
regardless, and I mean, listen, that 2020 year, we saw a lot of alterations for championship, protocols all over sports. Okay.
Yeah.
But at the end of the year, the commissioners of each league were still handing out trophies. Every like basically all of the players, all of the team owners, they agreed to it. So, if they were on board with it, I think everybody else needs to be on board with it as well because regardless of whether it was the Lakers, the Heat, the Nuggets, the Clippers, the Celtics, whomever, everybody went down there to Orlando that year knowing, hey, somebody was going home with the Larry O'Brien trophy. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
so yeah, but I really do feel that was the Clippers' best opportunity
Yep.
right there because you can't count on Kawhi, you can't count on Paul George, and it's
And you
unfortunate.
can't count on Doc.
No, and listen, and of course Doc lost his job there. Doc has lost another job since, and
Yep.
it's not gonna be long before we're saying Doc lost another job.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
There's a
So.
reason why Darvin Ham is back on that coaching staff as the head assistant. There's or associate head coach, whatever they named him. There's a
Mhm.
reason Darvin Ham is back over there with the Bucks. There's a reason why Scott Brooks and McMillan are
Name
on
it.
JJ Redick's coaching staff.
Right.
There's a reason. It's like your replacement is right here, buddy. So you
Yeah.
better get the job done.
And I think, just jumping back to Milwaukee a little bit quick, I think that kind of scared Adrian Griffin last year because remember he brought in, I don't know if he brought in or Terry Stotts was already there
Yeah,
as his
they brought
assistant.
him in. They brought
Right.
Stocks in.
And you figure Stotts was, basically a guy that could help with Dame because
Yep.
Dame loved Terry Stotts. He was
Yep.
thrilled when he got fired in Portland. And, it's one of those where they butted heads and even before the season began, Stotts left. So like listen, having that top tier assistant coach, especially a guy, who has done it before, it means something. And like more often than not, players like really respect their assistant coaches. I know it didn't work out for Luke Walton in LA, but the people in Golden State love Luke Walton. Remember,
He should have never left Golden State.
he coached most of that year, I think, when they won the 73 games. That's when Steve Kerr was out,
Mm-hmm.
and like the players would have ran through a wall for Luke Walton.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So like sometimes that assistant coach, you know, he means more to the team than people give him credit for. Just real quick, I think back to when Pat Riley left the Knicks and the Knicks front office wanted to make a splash and they brought in Don Nelson. And Don Nelson's coaching style did not fit that Knicks team. I'm like, you got Patrick Ewing and Charles Oakley and guys like that lumbering up the court. And you
And you
want
want a run and gun coach.
yeah, and it's like, what did they do? They still had Jeff Van Gundy as a holdover from Pat Riley's staff. So when they fired Don Nelson, they promoted Van Gundy, and the Knicks got back to being the Knicks.
Yeah,
So,
to
so it's
their
like,
true identity.
right. So like having that assistant coach makes a difference. So, we talked about the winners. Who do you think are the most disappointing teams so far this offseason?
Not including the Lakers.
Not including the Lakers.
Phoenix, because they still have not added a point guard. And John Wall is still sitting home. And John Wall is on social media saying, I just want one more chance. They could easily sign John Wall. Um, Atlanta, Toronto, they gave Scotty, I know they had to do it
Mhm.
to keep Scotty Barnes. They gave him way too much money. They gave Quickly way too much money. I knew it was going to happen though.
Mhm.
Um, who else? Mm, I would say those are my top as it pertains to the worst performance and getting better in the off season.
I'm going to
I would
throw
say those teams.
I'm going to throw one more team into this mix, and I talked about them, a few days ago, and I know like some cats out there agree with me, some cats didn't, but like I still feel like I wasn't like sold by what the Pistons did because I'm saying this
Oh,
for
I'm not even thinking about the Pistons. They're not even on anyone's radar. They shouldn't
and
be.
and like I say that because I know it was just a 2 year deal, but giving Tobias Harris 26 million a year, and
Crazy.
then paying Cade Cunningham the amount of money that they did, what I'm
He's
saying?
in the Scotty Barnes camp. But
Right,
at least Scotty Barnes was an all-star
right.
last season.
And Cade, to his credit, he has potential, but he hasn't shown that he can stay healthy, so far, in his NBA career. But, I think like, clearly you could see some teams that are, the ones that are focused on winning and the ones that aren't. And, we've talked in a roundabout way about the Bulls because, all signs point to DeMar DeRozan not being there,
Hmm.
by the end of the month. Possibly Zach LaVine as well. It, you know, it hurts. And the reason why I say this because before Lonzo Ball got hurt, they had the best record in the East. And I like
Yep, they were rolling.
and they had something going. And it's like Lonzo, his knee is never going to be the same again. You could try all you want, but
I agree.
as a basketball player, your knees don't get better. And
No, and that is very unfortunate too, because I like the kid.
yeah, and I think finally he was finally finding his game and he was finding a place where he fit because there was too much pressure on him in LA, and a lot of that was because of his dad. And of course, he got out of LA and went to New Orleans. He was starting to show some flashes, but I think going to Chicago and being with a college coach and Billy Donovan, I think helped him. And then he was a perfect facilitator for that team. And the
Yeah,
Bulls, they've never been the same, man. And it's
no,
just,
they haven't been.
and we never knew what they could have been. And now getting back to like just throwing it out there, if DeRozan goes to the Kings and you're talking about you're like depending on what they have to give up, but you're
Hmm.
talking about you still would have De'Aaron Fox, I would assume.
And
Um,
Monk coming
and,
off the
and
bench.
Monk coming off the bench. I don't know if them getting DeRozan would mean they'd have to give up, like a Domantas Sabonis or somebody like that. But you still have, you definitely would have De'Aaron Fox and DeRozan. Listen, the Kings, they're going to be a problem in the West if that
I
happens.
would imagine, I would imagine that them attempting to get DeRozan is to have him form a big three light with De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis.
Yeah.
So the Bulls would probably want Keegan Murray.
Okay. I can see that happen.
That's probably who would have to be included in the
Mhm.
deal, and I would do it. I would do it.
And then, just one more team that I definitely wanted to touch on here. A move that some people talked about, but I feel like they didn't talk about it enough. Chris Paul going to the Spurs. And like the Spurs, they're retooling. Okay. Clearly, we know that. But, Chris Paul at this point in his career, it's one of those where he can be a buffer between a head coach as well as a young player like a Victor Wembanyama. And not only can he school him on the court, but also school him, from the bench as well. I think that move is going to be big. I'm not saying that the Spurs are going to turn around and be a playoff team next season per se, but from a teaching aspect, I think that's a move that enough people are not talking about, in my opinion.
The biggest magic trick that Chris Paul is going to pull off is getting the Spurs into the play-in.
You think
Mark
so?
my words. He may get them into the play-in because he's already shown how he can fast track a young team's success and learning curve when he got traded
Oh,
to OKC.
right.
He's already shown it. I
Hmm.
thought that the Spurs should have went after Trae Young, but then when I saw they signed Chris Paul, I was like, "Oh my God, why didn't I think of this? This was even better. This was even better because he can actually teach Wembanyama not only the game, but teach everybody else where you need to get Wembanyama the ball. Because there were too many times last season where not only did they not want to pass him the ball because those young guys was trying to establish themselves,
Hmm.
but they would pass him the ball in places where he really had to create for himself instead of making the game a little bit easier for him.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if his scoring took a jump to like 25, 26 a game. I would not be surprised at all.
Listen, I mean, you might be right, and I think he's going to have more confidence, this summer, in the Olympics. And I saw something that was very scary, but scary good. I saw like the French national team. posing for a picture, and Wemby was standing next to Rudy Gobert.
towering over him.
Right, and Rudy Gobert is like 7'3".
Rudy Gobert was looking like a regular proportioned, a regular sized human being standing
You,
next to
you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the first matchup that the Rockets had with the Lakers when
Yep.
Yao Ming got drafted. And I've seen Shaquille O'Neal in person before. Shaq is no small guy. And it was like the first time in my life that I saw Shaq looking up to somebody and
Hmm.
you're like, wow, this dude is big. That's what it was like.
Exactly.
That's what it was like with Wemby standing next to Rudy
Rudy
Gobert.
Gobert.
Right.
Yeah.
So with that said, with where we're at right now, not in the exact order,
Hmm.
who do you think are the top five teams in the East after the draft and free agency?
So the top five teams in the East: Celtics number one,
Mm-hmm.
Knicks number two,
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia number three,
Mm-hmm.
Milwaukee, no, Indiana number four,
Mm-hmm.
Milwaukee number five.
I I hear that. I'm just gonna swap Indiana and Milwaukee with you.
Okay.
Like that's the only thing I would do is swap them. But of course, if that was the case and they met in the playoffs again, that speed that the Pacers have, could once again, would be a deciding factor in that series. And so
Yep.
I'm gonna ask you the same question about the West right now.
Western Conference. So I'm gonna say Timberwolves number one,
Hmm.
uh Denver number two,
Hmm.
Dallas number three, Memphis number four,
Hmm.
and then number five would be a wild card. Number if they don't trade Brandon Ingram, now that they have DeJounte Murray
Hmm.
at the one, sliding McCollum over to the two, I say the Pelicans taking that fifth spot.
Okay, so like that's very interesting right there because um like you're putting Memphis back in that mix because like you're anticipating Ja coming back and being Ja once again.
Exactly. And not to mention the leap that Jaren Jackson took last season
Hmm.
because he had to be a main guy.
Right.
And what's their two guards name?
Oh man, it's slipping my head right now. Please
Oh
forgive
my
me.
God, what is their shooting guard's name? He took another leap. So now you're going to be adding John Morant and Steven Adams back to this crew. So they're going to be amazing.
Listen, the West, wow, the West is going to be very interesting next year because you got Houston who just missed it, this past season. Okay, they really haven't done anything this summer, but not because they weren't trying. Um, you know, I'm with you on Memphis being better. New Orleans, that should be very interesting. You know, Phoenix can still be a playoff team, with their guys. Um, the Clippers are going to take a step back, but I still think they're a playoff team. You know, the Lakers, where do they fit in everything? Denver, Minnesota, OKC. So, listen, all jokes aside, we might see the Warriors not make the playoffs again this year. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
yes,
and and it might be a scenario, be honest with you, round one, both LeBron and Steph could be watching the playoffs from home. You know
they
what I'm
could
saying?
be.
It's
They
a
very well could be.
very strong possibility because I'm just looking at it and like the West is stacked. And then, I mean, you look at the East. I'm right there with those top five, those top five teams that you mentioned. Then, you could throw Miami into the mix as far as being a potential playoff team. You could throw Orlando into that mix as far as being a potential playoff team. Cleveland,
Hmm.
as well. So, I mean, you have some teams that are already not, well, de facto tanking, if you will, like the Nets are stockpiling picks, but I'm not sold on it because draft picks are only draft picks if you know what you're doing with them.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and and
And
and
depending on the draft.
Right.
because like this year's draft, it was weak. It was completely weak.
Well, the thought process is that next year's draft is going to be stronger than this year's. So, teams are like kind of gearing up. That's kind of like what the Bulls are looking to do now, as far as like maybe trading a DeRozan and a Levine, because they're looking to come back stronger, because they know that next year's draft is going to be better. But again, it still comes down to, drafting and developing your guys. That's why I'm not sold on a team like the Nets because that's something that their organization has never really done. You figure,
Not since they fired Atkinson.
yeah, and that was a stupid move.
Hmm.
Now he finally took another head coaching gig because remember he got interviewed for Charlotte, and
Yeah.
he saw the tea leaves and he was like, you know what, I'm good. And but now you go to Cleveland, that's a very interesting fit right there for a head coach and a team. So I really want to see how that's going to work because Kenny Atkinson is a darn good coach.
Yes,
Okay,
he is.
and I mean, you look at the team that he took to the playoffs with the Nets when he was there, when it was D'Angelo Russell, it was Karis LeVert, Joe Harris,
Dinwiddie.
Dinwiddie, so they had something right there. And they were building something. And then of course they mortgaged all of that for Kyrie and KD.
Yep.
And I knew it wasn't gonna work out from the jump. But yeah, so like the draft picks are only good if you know what you're doing with them. But I look at it like this, man. I think there are certain teams that had a game plan coming into the summer and they executed it. I don't think Philly getting Paul George is going to lead to a championship, but I will say this. That was their guy from day one.
They have a
And it,
chance.
and they went out there and made it happen to the point
Yep.
that when they flew out to LA to meet him, Dr. J was a part of their contingent.
Yeah,
Okay.
they were serious.
Right. And it's like, yo, if Dr. J walks in a room, you listen.
You listen. You
You,
listen. They were serious.
yeah,
Boston, you can't put their roster, you can't put Boston's roster next to theirs and say Boston is the overwhelming favorite. I tell you that much. If
no,
Embiid and Paul George are healthy, I don't think Boston is a better team than Philadelphia.
no, because the thing is like Boston doesn't have anybody to stop Embiid if he's healthy.
Nobody. No
And
one.
and I like what the Knicks did from the standpoint that they said, Boston is a perimeter team. So what are we going to do if we have to
Two
go
top flight perimeter defenders with
right?
Josh Hart coming off the bench
And
to give you no break.
you still got Anunoby and again the Bridges pickup. Listen, I know Knick fans are happy that they got Bridges, but they're really going to be happy once they see him fit with this team. And it's kind of listen, it's stealing. To me, I'm not going to put it on the same level, but it's kind of like when the Lakers got Mark Gasol from the Grizzlies for absolutely nothing, and Greg
Nothing for
and Greg
nothing.
and Greg Popovich turned around and looked at David Stern like, "Yo, what are you doing?" It's one of those type things, and there's
But you
basically
know what? You know what happened? David Stern couldn't do it again because the Lakers were supposed to get Chris Paul and he nixed that trade. So he
yeah,
couldn't do it twice in a row to the same team.
no. So I looked at that, with the Knicks getting Bridges, and I'm like, usually the moves that we're seeing the Knicks make right now usually go in the opposite direction.
The
But
Knicks
now,
get fleeced.
right. But now it's like the Knicks are fleecing people. And
Hmm.
usually the teams that are able to fleece people are the ones that have success. You know what
Yes.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I really do like where the Knicks are going with that. Listen, the East is going to be very exciting next year.
Hmm.
Like the top of the East. And my biggest thing right now is everybody, coming out of the Olympics healthy.
Yes.
That's going to
Yeah.
be the biggest thing.
Yeah.
So let's see, what comes from there. And then of course, these guys getting the training camps and getting it going, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited for the new season that will soon be upon us in a couple of months.
It'll
Totally
be
excited.
it'll be here before you know it, man.
Yep.
But like
Definitely.
listen, man, this was tremendous right here, man. This
Yeah.
was
I had
good.
a great time. I
Listen,
had a great time.
it's always great for me, when I share this platform with you, you know what I'm saying? Because I feel like we get a lot covered. Well, let me rephrase that. I know we get a lot covered.
We get a lot covered, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's listen, listen, this was beautiful on this
Yeah.
one.
Oh,
And
and before we go, because I know there's gonna be somebody in the comment section that's gonna be like, all right, you listed your top five in the West. You didn't mention OKC, and they were number one last season, right? No one saw them being number one in the West last season.
mhm,
Nobody could have guessed that, right?
mhm,
They are a scary team at number six because then the three seed has to play the six. That will be crazy with a team like Denver going against OKC in the sixth seed. Now with Hartenstein providing muscle at the five and Caruso being that Swiss Army knife at the two. So the sixth seed for for OKC is more advantageous
yeah,
to that team
yeah.
than being the one seed. So because I already know somebody in the comments said, how could you not put OKC in the top five?
Listen,
That's the reason.
they're gonna be a problem. I mean, listen, regardless of where they finish, you know, in the you know,
Pecking order, right?
right. I still like them as a top 14 in the West because remember, you figure the top three really weren't separate. I think they were all separated by like a game between
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota, Denver,
In
and
OKC.
right. So they were all right there. So it's one of those where, yeah, they might have snuck up on some people last year. They're not going to sneak up on anybody this year, but they are still going to be a force to be reckoned with. For me, it's one of those where the way that the West is constructed, it wouldn't surprise me to see the one seed be like 55 and 27, but then
Exactly.
your eight seed is like 44 and 38. So there's really not, you know,
Much parity.
much of a gap. Whereas with the East, whether it's the Knicks or the Celtics, I think somebody's going to win 60 games next
Yeah.
season. You might get two 60 win teams out there. Because on the flip side, you're going to have some 60 loss teams out there. The Nets are easily going to lose 50 games, okay?
Yeah.
The Pistons are definitely going to lose 50 games again.
Definitely.
Portland is probably going to lose 50 games again.
Yep.
Okay,
They're a lot.
people might not want to hear this, but Golden State is going to flirt with losing at least 45 games next season. Okay. It's like, then you've got Charlotte, you've got Toronto. So you got some teams. I think Charlotte definitely loses at least 50 next season. So my
Mm-hmm.
point is, with all of those losses, those wins have to go someplace. So I think, the big boys of the East,
Are gonna eat those wins up.
exactly like Pac-Man.
Yep. Yep.
You know what I'm saying? But Aaron, man, listen, it has been a pleasure, man. Listen, please, please, please. I always tell this to people, I've told it to you before, and I'm gonna tell it to you one more time. Take this opportunity to showcase who you are and what you do, and where the great people out there can find you, man.
So, Brothers Talking NBA Basketball Podcast. That's on TikTok, um, IG. I post on Facebook, YouTube. All things NBA basketball is what I focus on. Um, yeah, I mean, I do other things like head of the literary department for a talent agency. A sitcom that I created looks like it's about to go into production. We're gonna keep our fingers crossed, right? So yeah, all things entertainment.
Listen, as always, Ern, trust me, it's a pleasure. I've been on here with you. I've been on your channel as well, and every time I am never disappointed. You know what I'm saying? Because we do tremendous work, and it's not. It's one of those before you big up somebody else, you got to big up yourself, of course, because sometimes you have to be your own best cheerleader.
Yes,
But I'm here to tell you,
definitely.
listen, I definitely appreciate everything that you're doing, man.
Thanks for having me, Will.
Thank you, man. And as always, folks, if you like what you saw and heard, please feel free to hit that like and subscribe button on this channel. want to thank once again, take this time out to thank all of you tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. If you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also that sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating podcasts or sites, rather, excuse me, going on social media. Ern, as always, it was a pleasure. Thanks once again. I'm signing off and saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.